So what I thought I probably should be doing here is trying to bring some of the elements that the academic literature and academic work on urban economics and innovation economics can tell us about how this project will affect the, we can call it the innovation model to which Toronto is, towards which Toronto is heading, and how this will be affected by sidewalks. I think I will probably start with some optimism. What I think it's important to point out, what I think I'm trying to illustrate, is that although Sidewalk Labs is an experiment in the end of urban innovation, it will likely going to affect a wide range of outcomes, of dimensions in the innovation system of Toronto that go way beyond the urban innovation dimension. So I think this is an important point to keep in mind. So, and my view, from this point of view, will be optimistic in the sense that I think this is an experiment that will shift the innovation model of the City of Toronto towards a direction which is good, possibly better than the one in which it is now. But then I will also add a severe word of caution, of possibly pessimism for some of the possibly negative outcomes that we should be really concerned about, some of which have been already mentioned by Christine. But then I also want to conclude with a final word of optimism. So if there is, my view is that if there is a city that should try to experiment in this dimension, that is exactly Toronto. And I will try to argue about that as well. So the first thing I was mentioning was the model of innovation. And now, even if this is an experiment in urban innovation, we are trying to make our cities better or different to some dimension, the entire innovation system of the City of Toronto is going to be affected by this experiment. And to innovation economists and urban economists, this experiment literally sent a very clear signal that the innovation model that we are trying to follow will shift from a suburban model towards an urban model, where most of the innovation will take place in the most densely populated segment portion of the city and will possibly move away from the lower density parts of the city. Is this important? Does this matter actually for the type of innovation we produce? Well, we make empirical work and we write theoretical models. And there is strong evidence to suggest that the type of innovation that is produced in densely populated areas is very different from the type of innovation that is produced in low density populated areas. In what dimension is it different? In low density populated areas, you tend to find large companies that are very good at internalizing some specific type of knowledge spillovers, mostly intrafield. Think about Bayer setting up large labs and being very good at hiring and retaining biologists, but not being very good at letting biologists interact with people who do completely different stuff. So large companies that tend to locate themselves in suburban areas are very good at internalizing these type of spillovers within field, intra-firm, but they're not very good at internalizing cross-field spillovers. And there is strong evidence to suggest that these cross-field spillovers are actually potentially more important in the sense that they lead to a type of innovation that has higher returns. So by promoting a model of innovation that is more focused on the urban part, the high density populated part, what this promotes is informal interactions, which is the only way in which these cross-field spillovers can emerge, and the only way through which this type of special innovation that merge different fields can actually originate. So I think this is the good thing that popped in my mind as soon as I think about Sidewalk Labs. But there is going to be a negative side of this, as much of the evidence that we have about what is the impact of the tech sector on urban inequalities. We know that when a new tech cluster forms, there are going to be better employment opportunities for high salary workers, high education workers, and they will relocate. They will change their residential choices in order to reduce their commuting distance from work. Now, this pattern happens for universities, and this happens for tech clusters of other types, we really have no reason to believe that this is not going to happen for a project like this one. So most likely it's going to happen. Straightforward implication is that income segregation will go up, meaning you will increase the concentration of wealth within the city, the geographical concentration of wealth within the city, and potentially this might generate some negative effects that we might want to avoid. Here, we can be pessimistic, but on the other hand, we have to realize that we have some policy tools that we can put in place, and there is something we can learn about these policy tools, including from the literature I'm most attached to. And I've also seen that some of these policy tools have been mentioned by the previous presenter. So, okay, but still, segregation is going to go up. My prediction probably is that inequality is going to go up. These are costs that the society has to pay. And we have to ask ourselves, what kind of society is in a better position to pay these costs? What are the characteristics of the society that make us in a better or in a worse position to pay this kind of cost in terms of higher segregation and higher inequality? A country or a city in which we have universal health care and a decent level of redistribution of resources, a divergence in the quality of schooling and in this kind of social services and public services that is not as drastic as the one we have in the United States, is probably in a better position to risk this kind of negative outcomes. I know this is a little bit provocative, but what I'm saying is that Canada should risk more in the inequality side, on the segregation side, than what the US can afford to risk. So we can risk more if this can help us unleash some sustainable and robust growth and innovation potential. I believe this is actually the case. I believe that these kind of experiments, Canada is in a better position to carry out this kind of experiments. We also have to ask another question, which is, in the end, Sidewalk Labs is part of Alphabet. Correct me if I'm wrong. It's a private company. The question is, to what extent can a private company neglect the negative externalities they pose on the city? Can they? Can they at all? And if they can, to what extent can they neglect them? So my view is that they can't. I mean, they can to some extent, but in the good case scenario, they risk bad publicity, so bad reputation, sabotage, possibly political retaliation. And this is in the best case scenario, because in the worst case scenario, they actually risk to undermine the characteristics of the place where they decided to locate, from which they were actually trying to extract their competitive advantage. So if they work to generate a worse quality of living in the city of Toronto, this will eventually backfire to them. So the extent to which they can neglect these negative externalities that pose on the city is very limited, and there is actually an upper bound. So I think for all of these reasons, the reasons to be optimistic are in a way heavy enough, let's put it this way, to justify this experiment, and we still have to keep in mind that there are some costs involved, and we have to make sure we use the right policy tools to address them.
Good. Thank you very much, Ruben.